to Peas in a Podcast. If you've ever thought, why didn't anyone tell me this before I started running a business, then you are in the right place. Each week we unpack the human stuff that makes or breaks your business without the corporate wank. This week we are talking about what is really driving your employee performance. And I am joined not by Becky today, if you're watching. I'm joined by Nikki Prentice-Jones.
Hello.
Hello, Nikki. And you are one of our Peas in the Pod. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are, how you come to us and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I'm one of the P's. I officially been with the P's since 2023, but actually I feel like we've worked together
Yes.
for quite a while before that in a different organisation. So within the P's, I led and designed training and coaching programs for amazing clients. I've particularly focused on the voluntary and charity and social enterprise clients, which has been a joy. That's also been my background, but also I've been in corporate and small, medium-sized enterprises before that as well. So, the whole scope of things, there's so much variety here. I think, yes, lots of training and facilitation and coaching with our clients, but also managing staff and managing our all sorts of things, performance improvement plans, all of that, as well as recruitment. So a whole range of different things.
You've definitely got stuck right in, and it's such a joy to have you here today. So we're talking about employee performance, which is a huge specialism of yours. Talk to everybody about what your definition of performance looks like.
But I think performance breaks down into sort of three components, really. And if we think of, I love my triangles, I'm going to do this. If we think of a triangle around performance, performance equals direction at the top of the triangle, so the what. It also equals skills, so that's the how, the skills and behaviour in order for that direction to be achieved. But the really important bit is in the other corner, which is motivation, which is the why bother bit, the why. And all of that feeds into that triangle as the performance. So you could see it as an equation, if you like maths. So performance equals direction times skills times motivation. So you've got those three essential components of performance. So that to me is the simplest way I think about performance, because performance actually just does fit into those three different components.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about that is we see so often with leaders, managers in their own business or even in larger scale organizations, which that's been quite a bit of your background. We see them really focus on what, don't we? What's the strategy? What's the plan? What are the goals? What is it that we need to be doing to achieve that? And that's just one of those three components that you describe. If we're really lucky, we might have organizations that break it to how and start thinking about how would we like that done? How would we like to be with each other? What skills and capabilities do we need?
But that's also going into the values, isn't it? And the culture piece of an organization, as well as the skills and abilities in order for that direction to be achieved. So the strategy, which is set by the business owners to be achieved. But I think the hard bit, it is a hard bit. The people pillar of any business can be a hard element for managers and leadership. And motivation, we all know it's really, really important. There's so much that it's so important to an organization, to the individual. But actually, it's really hard to get a fix on that, isn't it?
It is really hard. And I think that third piece of the puzzle, I don't know. I mean, you got me into motivational mapping, and we will talk a bit about that later because I love it. I'm so grateful for you for kind of exposing me to that world. But that third piece around why bother? We've got the what, we've got the how, and including in that our values. But I think it's probably something that people don't consciously think about.
I agree.
So to see it as a really important component of performance can be quite an eye-opener for people. But am I right in thinking, and you're always much better at the theory than I am I right in thinking that actually of that equation, the motivation, the why bother, is the multiplier?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't have the why bother, if you don't have that consistency, you don't get the results. And of course, that affects the bottom line. So all three are key to performance.
And the thing is, you can have all of the skills and all of the direction in the world, but if an employee doesn't want to deploy it or doesn't see the reason for deploying it, it's absolutely useless to you, isn't it?
Absolutely. We've you've mentioned Motivational Maps. I think it might be worth just talking a little bit about this amazing tool, which I did introduce you to back in 2019. Yeah. I think you became a licensed practitioner, and I became a licensed practitioner back in 2014. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about why. We're talking about the why. I was working with a business growth consultancy at the time, particularly for small, medium-sized enterprises who were in sort of high growth phase. And we would talk to the managing directors, and then we'd go and talk to the staff, and there was a disjunct between the two. And it was that people pillar that was really hard to get a fix on. I was then at a dinner party one evening with a friend, and he mentioned they'd had this incredible day at his organisation, and it was all around the lens of motivation, and everyone got so much out of it. And it was really impactful. I just thought, I've got to just look into this. What is this thing called Motivational Maps? So I found out a little bit more about it. I became trained in it to become a licensed practitioner. But I think sometimes you have to experience things yourself first, don't you? And I filled out a questionnaire. Back came about a 15-page report. Only took about, 12 minutes to do this questionnaire. And it was so incredibly accurate about what energized me, what drained me, why I get out of bed in the morning. And it really gave me understanding about things that I'd internally detected for years, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I didn't really know why. And suddenly, here in kind of black and white, it became so obvious as to the cause of my behavior and what was really driving me, and why some environments, like, for example, when I was working in the corporate environment, it became like wading through treacle. Because one of my top motivators is the need for meaning and purpose. And I was a cog in a massive wheel, and I didn't see where I was making that difference or that purpose. So that was huge to me personally. So I knew it worked for me, which is why I decided to, branch out into this and get trained into it. And I've been using it, I think, ever since. So for individuals or teams, and, at an organizational level as well. So, it's an amazing tool that looks at what gets you out of bed in the morning, what drives you, what's important to you, what isn't important to you. And everybody has these different motivators within them at play at any one time.
Let's talk about them. Because I think it's really important. I think even, the map is an incredible tool. But even just having an understanding that different people are wired differently.
Absolutely.
We know that. People know that. But this gives you a language. So tell us a little bit more about the motivators.
So research shows that motivation flows in 9 different directions. So there's 9 different motivators at play within all of us at any one time. No one is better than the other. There's no right or wrong. This is completely without judgment, which again is, it's a great thing. So if we think about these 9 different motivators, we've got the need for belonging and connection. That's a really important one. We've got the need for stability and predictability and security, and also a need for recognition. That can be both externally from others, but it's also how you kind of recognize yourself within yourself. It's an interesting one, that. And then we've got, influence, taking responsibility, power, in a sense, over people and resources. Well, it's one about money. It's interesting that only one is about money. Because within organizations, we pay you, don't we? Just get on with your job. But actually, that's a need, perhaps more than a want for that person. You just don't know, because you see a map shows that. And then there's the one for mastery. So becoming a subject matter expert in what you're interested in. And then there's what we call the more sort of growth motivators, where the focus is on ideas. So this is about bringing the new into being and innovation. It's also about autonomy and freedom and independence, and also about meaning and purpose. So those are kind of like the headlines of these 9 different directions that motivation can flow in.
And I love that. I love the word flow, because I think one of the things that's really important that perhaps people don't always fully appreciate or even just consciously think about is that motivation is a flow of energy. That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a flow of energy. And it's variable. It changes. Talk to us a little bit more around the flow of energy and what might make it kind of ebb and flow away.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a psychological state, so it's highly changeable, and it's constantly moving. And we can see big shifts actually after about a year. Motivation can move, but motivation can flow in a different direction, but it does depend also what's going on for that person too, as well as the work environment, so we kind of look at the whole. If we think about motivation, a wonderful colleague of ours who's in our mapping community, Sarah Stones, she used the analogy of a kettle. So we want to have a boil the kettle, but what fuel do we use? We can plug it in, use electricity. If it's on a gas hob, we use the gas. If we're camping, we put it over a fire. We still get the end result, but the fuel is very different.
Yeah.
And we can also think about that in terms of fuel for an engine. What are our internal engines wanting? And the different fuel that we could use to top those up. So those motivators that, we just talked about all have a different fuel.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I think it's such an eye-opener. It's so reassuring to know that it's okay that everybody has different motivators. It's really amazing to understand that there's a tool for knowing what they are.
Yeah.
I think, people who are self-aware will understand that they don't want to work in organizations where they're micromanaged, for example, or they would rather have an organization that offers them the stability and security of pension and contractual sickness and all of those things. There is also your own personal example, which is very similar to mine, that you have to have an impact. You have to be doing something meaningful. You want to be mission driven, which is why we've really enjoyed some of our VCSE work that we've done over recent years. But everybody's different. And what I love about being able to map motivation is, you've always said, make the invisible visible.
That's right.
And when we think about that from a productivity perspective for a line manager as part of that all-important equation, it starts to make sense that you can have the what and the how, but if you don't understand what is driving, what fuel to put in the tank to get the best from people, both when they're responsible for their own performance, but also as a line manager, how you can, we call them hot buttons, don't we? Press hot buttons to engage them and want to get them into that flow state, which is ultimately what we're talking about when we're talking about high motivation. We're talking about that great feeling of being in flow and things feeling easy.
And that goes to the benefits of motivation, because at a personal level, we call it like the 3 E's. You're, engaged, enthusiastic, energized. So you've got all that going on. And we know how that feels on a personal level, don't we? But on an organizational level, there's productivity, there's performance. And if the strategy's right, there's profitability. So this absolutely affects the bottom line.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting. Both you and I do the pink and fluffy HR, if you like, at Peas in a Pod. But I think, especially in the last kind of couple of years, I've really looked at that through a different lens. And I think what you just said captures it brilliantly. This is actually around mobilizing people to get them to a state where they're productive, which ultimately is going to affect how much money you make day to day.
It absolutely does affect the bottom line.
Yeah.
And we've all been in organizations where it's pretty, people are pretty disengaged. I worked for an organization where it was a fairly large team. I don't really like the word toxic, but I am going to use it in this case because the culture was quite toxic and people weren't getting on with each other. We mapped the whole team, and I think there was 16. And then we did a team session together. And it was just fascinating for people to see what mattered to other people and what they valued in that team. And it wasn't necessarily what they thought was important. And we say there's no such thing really as a personality clash. I know a lot of people who maybe, if they don't necessarily get along, there's a bit of a rub. It's often a motivational difference, not a personality clash. And this gives the language, doesn't it, through conflict. But it was really interesting in that team to have the session with them all together. A couple of people did leave the organisation afterwards. I think that was going to happen anyway. But sometimes when you see it in sort of black and white, and it does then make sense, then, the great thing about it is that then you've got the choice as to what you can do with that information.
Yeah, which is so important, offering people a sense that they don't have to be stuck where they are, that there are reasons that they might be feeling less engaged, less enthusiastic, less motivated overall. And what I really love about this exercise is not only can we look at what direction our energy is flowing in, what fuel we want to put in the tank to make those motivators really go zingy, but we can also see if it's on the way down. And I think that's worth mentioning because we are concerned with employee well-being. We are concerned with people's well-being overall and making sure they're looking after themselves and their mental health. And there's a direct link between how you feel in terms of your engagement and your motivation and how mentally well you are. And we see that when we look at the kind of overall levels of motivation combined, don't we? Talk to us about that a little bit.
So the overall levels of motivation is generally taken from your top 3, so the things that you really do value, things that are really important to you. And it could be that, you're right in the zone. And then the question is, well, how do you stay there? Like an athlete at the top of their game. How do they stay in that zone? And that can be quite challenging, even when it's all that great motivation, you're feeling really great about what you're doing and about guess, where your life is at that point in time. Then there can be a slight drop off of motivation for the things that you really value, and that there may be some tweaks. It could be in the environment in terms of your work, and you just that there might be some small changes. It could be around communication. It could be around just being offered a slightly different role on a project, whatever it may be. That will actually really feed into the things that you value, and then you're feeling energized again.
Yeah.
But there are motivations where, if they're not topped up, you can really feel quite low, because this is about energy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that sort of wading through treacle and not wanting to come in the morning and feeling disengaged, or, really doesn't feel good personally, does it? And it certainly isn't good for the organisation either. So then you need some specific strategies, and being able to give that person more of what they need to have their motivational levels topped up.
Yeah, or get them to come to the conclusion that actually the environment in this instance, there isn't much that can be changed or done.
That can be an outcome.
What I find really interesting, because we're both NLP as well, aren't we, is that then we can either look at the environment as needing to change and say, maybe this is a time for you to choose something different for yourself.
Yeah.
Or we could perhaps change what we believe about the environment and do some belief work around that. And that is really, really powerful when it comes to the mindset of an employee. I think it's worth investing in, because at a team level, we're talking about, and even an organizational level, we're talking about things starting to creep in when the engagement levels and the motivation is slipping. Like absence, lateness, low productivity, high employee turnover, general morale issues. Like this can be quite far-reaching,
and it has a big impact on the organisation, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, that costs to the bottom line.
Yeah, it does. And what's really interesting about these motivators is some of them don't get on. You mentioned and alluded in your example you just gave to in a team scenario where we understand that people are wired so differently. So, I mean, a great example is if somebody is very high influence, control, directive, and somebody else is very perhaps high belonging, friendships, connection. One can appear quite cold to the other, and the other can appear quite needy, perhaps. It's in our interpretation. It's highly dependent on the context and the person.
That's right.
So no generalizations, but that's just one example. Similarly, if somebody's very concerned with wealth, affluence, perhaps in combination with status, and somebody else is actually really mission or purpose driven, that could have rubbed people up the wrong way.
That can, depending on the context of the situation. There can be tension. And another example is when somebody might really want their freedom and their independence to do something. Tell me what I need to do now, let me go off and do it, and I'll come back and show you once I've done it. But somebody might be highly directive and they want to know exactly what that person is doing, and they're micromanaging them, and that absolutely doesn't work for the person who needs their freedom in order to do that piece of work.
No. What's really interesting about that, and we know that not only are we looking at the different motivators, how well overall you're motivated, we're also looking at how, we call it spiky, your motivators are. So how much range have you got between the absolute top motivator and the bottom one? And that's really interesting, because if we have people who are more balanced across all the motivators, so if you've got people who think, well, that sounds a bit like me, but that sounds a bit like me, that sounds also a bit like me, they all sound great. That's because they're all really important for starters. But second of all, if you have got quite evenly balanced motivators, you can find satisfaction in so much.
You can lean into different things.
Exactly, which sounds great at first, but I always use the example of my husband, who has a really flat level of motivation. So he can find motivation all over the shop, but that means that nothing's ever quite bad enough for him to want to remove himself from a situation or a work situation, or change things for himself, seek out some change. And that's always really interesting to know if you've got somebody that maybe a little bit of a plodder, because it's like looking at them and going, okay, well, are you finding just about enough? But then what we can find is that motivation can erode quite slowly over time. I say it like, a little bit like the frog in boiling water. It kind of will just let itself boil to death. And if no one intervenes, and I can sort of relate that sometimes to an employee situation where someone's hung around maybe longer than they should, and things haven't been shaken up and changed. But on the flip side, when somebody's very, very highly focused on what they want and need and getting those needs met, and then perhaps things aren't going quite the way they want them to, they'll show it by either voting with their feet or having quite a strong emotional reaction.
That's right.
So it's even understanding those types of behaviours as well.
Because I think with the profile, it depends how high, as you say, those top motivators are particularly. So I'm I'll use myself as an example. The need for meaning, making a difference and purpose is extremely high for me.
Yes.
I will disengage if that's not there.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel a bit lost.
Yeah.
Because it's not there. As soon as it's there, I'm absolutely locked in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it?
It's really interesting. And I love the fact that we're in a position to be able to bring this level of self-awareness, but also be able to help managers understand this stuff as well. Because we're talking about these kind of conflicting motivators. We're talking about how the strength of preference might impact behavior.
Yeah.
For a manager, this is absolute gold dust, and we've seen it, haven't we? Because it does make the invisible visible.
It does.
But even just having an understanding through this conversation that this may well be about somebody's values, needs, wants, preference, as opposed to character. Is so helpful in maybe just trying to be a little bit more curious when you're navigating what appears to be somebody's performance slipping because they're becoming less productive, or they seem to be disengaging and you're not sure why, or even that maybe a conflict has emerged between one or more people within the team. Just understanding that might not be a personality clash, actually. It might just be a difference in needs and wants.
That's right. And with those 9 flows of motivation, if one, say, is particularly high in the need for, and I use the example that, the autonomy and independence, and yet somebody sort of breathing down their neck and micromanaging, that there's going to be a clash. There's going to be quite a reaction that can appear to be a personality clash. It really isn't. It's about what that person needs and the other person recognizing those needs. So therefore give them all of what they want, and therefore you will have a much more engaged and motivated members of your team.
Yeah. And actually what's really interesting there is when we're talking about giving them what they want, like you say, only one's money. Quite often when we're talking about looking at motivation across organizations, large or small, we're looking at the reward and recognition that we're delivering. And we're talking again on a small local small business scale here. But the first tool that someone will reach for is a pay rise or a bonus. And then they're really shocked that within a month or two people have
really working.
It's not because maybe it's not been, they'll say thank you, they'll be appreciative, I'm sure they'll be grateful, but it might not drive any change in behavior at a deeper level. Because actually what you've done there without even knowing it, it's a lovely thing to do, generous, but you've assumed that what everybody wants is a bit more cash, and that might be 1 in 10 people that satisfies their motivators and actually drives some behavior change, and the rest.
It's a need, isn't it? It's a need, and we all recognise that. But what are the other? We call them wants and needs. So those motivators that are really strong for that person, they want more of that. They want more meaning. They want more autonomy. They want more connection. You'll probably find as a hygiene factor in that all is the money, of course. Cost of living's going up. We all need to live. That is really important, but it's a need rather than a want. And whilst it's always welcome, obviously, to have a pay rise, does that really get to the crux of the issue for that person? So it's asking those really insightful questions as a manager. And we certainly have a whole crib sheet, don't we? We give out to our clients and our managers to help them with these conversations.
Because it's all about asking the right questions. This is not, and I think that's actually, you've hit on something really important. This is not about making assumptions.
Never.
Or trying to guess. It's about having a lens, unless you are going to do a motivational map, which of course gives you the answers, and that's fantastic. But it's about just giving people an understanding and a lens that people are different, and it may not be as simple as who they are. It's around perhaps their preference and their wants and needs.
And also, I would say, as a manager, you've got your own map of the world going on. Your individual team members have got theirs, and it's recognizing. I guess it's recognizing that, isn't it? And that's okay, because that is the way it is. So asking those open and more sort of insightful questions will give you so much more information about what is really going on for that person.
So I guess our kind of overall overarching message, should I say, is that when it comes to what's driving performance, it's what, how and why bother. And actually the why bother is an important and often missed element. So absolutely, we'll talk week on week in this podcast as well about setting the right goals and objectives and giving clarity of direction and making sure your values are championed and making sure you have underpinning behaviours and all of those things. You've got great job descriptions, but when it comes to performance and maximising it, optimising it and dealing with it when it slips, the why bother is probably your golden key to start getting curious around how can I ask questions that tap into what's driving the behavior and what's driving this person to want to get up and come to work, what matters to them. And even asking questions around how would you like to be managed, simple things, and not making assumptions that a pay rise is going to drive behavior, but maybe it's I'd like some more autonomy, I'd like to work from home once a week, I'd like it if the staff came together and we had some team building, because actually being friends with the people I work with is really important and we don't have time for any of that. I'd like to go on a training course, I'd like to just have a little bit of investment in learning, or go away and do some YouTube videos. People should be responsible for their own performance, but as a manager, just
providing the environment for that, isn't it?
Providing the environment, and also understanding that if we're looking to drive the behavior change of a group of people, it's about understanding what they need at an individual level.
Absolutely. And then that rolls up into that cumulative effect, doesn't it? So it's a great place to work.
Absolutely.
And then your organization is going to see the results, and they're going to see the bottom line improve.
Have you got any, before we finish, favorite stories or case studies where you've seen massive shifts?
When I it was a few years ago, I did a map, an individual map for someone, and they were a pediatric consultant in a hospital. They were really unhappy in their role at that point in time. It's a hard role, and the specialism they had was very difficult. They also loved baking, and their idea was that they were going to leave their the pediatric consultant job at the hospital and start up a shop and, bake basically and sell cakes. And we did a motivational map together. And there have often been aha moments within using the tool. But that person decided they really were on the right track. Things needed to change within the role, and it had to be slightly different. But they weren't going to leave and set up a cake shop. And I did this map about 6 or 7 years ago for this person, and I was in that hospital not so long ago, walking down the corridor, and there was that person walking towards me with a big smile on their face, and they're still doing what they're doing, and they're helping so many amazing, people, and they are still, being able to make that difference, which was what was so important to that person. So, I think, that is a bit of a aha moment for that person. Through using the motivational maps. But as you say, it's those open questions, and it's understanding what gets people out of bed in the morning, and having more of an idea around that, and sort of less judgment and more openness and curiosity, and people feeling heard. Their voices feeling heard.
It's a lovely conversation to have, even just the what do you need from me? And why do you choose to come to work here each day? And that's a really lovely story. And obviously we believe in the power of the maps, and I'm really grateful to you today for coming and chatting about that. I'm sure we could reconvene to do other bits and pieces.
I'm sure we will.
and obviously people can find you under the Peas in a Pod website, but also on LinkedIn as well. So connect with us, please, because we love that. That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this podcast with your network, and follow us on our socials at Pyatt Consulting. Join us next time, and until then, remember, people problems don't fix themselves, and healthy cultures never happen by accident. See you next Tuesday.